This podcast may contain disturbing content for some listeners. It's intended for mature audiences. Listener discretion is advised. This is True Crime XS.
I got the strangest press release this week that I think I've ever gotten, and when I sent it to you, I don't know if you realized that it was from a press release, but there was a sheriff had put out a press release, and it had this is involved with several cases that have been ongoing that I had looked at. It comes from North Carolina. Now, part of the case was in Lumberton, but overall it was this Robeson County thing that was going on. I think they made an error. The press release I got initially was 2 sentences long, and it had a picture of a bunch of sheriff's deputies with shovels. And I sent it to you, and I was like, "Are they digging under a back porch?" Because there's a couple of cases down in that area that I've been interested in, and there's one that was a kid. There's this whole rumor about a serial killer down there. There was a serial killer that was caught in that area. And there's all these sort of missing young women who seem to be affiliated with possible drug use that have gone missing. But this one, they've now confirmed that this case's missing portion is over, and they've recovered his body. This press release related to a search for human remains. They did find human remains, and this was the body of Billie Jean Hammonds. He was interesting to me because he's falling into this category that I've gotten more and more interested in, of larger people or taller people that go missing. And he's also an indigenous person, a Native American. So what's crazy about his case is I've actually been following it for I think about 5 years now. Had you heard of his case before?
I'm sure I have in passing.
So he has a Charlie Project profile out there, and it's just sort of brief. It's really based on this missing indigenous profile and the Q Center for Missing Persons, and I think maybe just from NamUs. But he went missing in November of 2016, and so pretty much everybody around that time is in contact with their family, unless you're just specifically not. That's Thanksgiving time. He was 6'2", and he was thought to weigh between 160 and 180 pounds. He was 36 years old when he went missing. He would be 41, turning 42 this year. He also had an October birthday, which is sort of another reason to be in contact with family and stuff for some people. And here's what Charlie Project had to say about him. Hammond was last seen in Lumberton, North Carolina at 10:30 p.m. on November 26, 2016. He went to visit his mother on Pinwheel Circle, and it's all in Lumberton that I'm talking about. He said he'd be back in about 30 minutes, but he never returned, and he's never been heard from again. So on December the 9th of 2016, his family reported him missing. That was a little odd to me because that's a couple weeks. But
I was going to say, how long was it?
So November
13
26th,
days.
Right, through December the 9th. They reported
13
missing.
days. Okay.
What was so interesting about the Charlie Project profile is this. A few days prior to his disappearance, Hammonds was present at a police shooting. He was in the parking lot of the Dollar General store on Martin Luther King Jr. Drive, and while he was being handcuffed by a Lumberton police officer named Daniel Maurice Smith, a woman named Rebecca Muse Hunt tried to drive away in spite of Smith telling Smith's repeated orders for Rebecca to stop. So Smith gets hit by the car door, and he shoots Rebecca Muse. Now, she's injured, but she survives, and the shooting ends up being ruled justified. So it's a justified shooting of Rebecca Muse Hunt that Billie Jean Hammonds is at. And this is like days before he just sort of goes poof. The rumor was that Rebecca and Billie Jean Hammonds were involved in something that went wrong with drugs, and it goes even more specifically. His dad theorized that he stole the drugs from someone, that he was stealing drugs from someone, and he got murdered as a result. Now, a couple different times they have gone and dug for this guy, and ultimately where they find him is in the same vicinity of where they were digging. So, like I said, they sent out this bizarre thing where doing an investigation in this area. It didn't talk about Billie Jean, but they're now confirming that it is Billie Jean.
So I didn't see the press release. You just sent me a random picture.
That was the press release. That's what I'm saying. That picture of the porch with the Senate's investigation in this area.
Well, it looked like there was maybe like a concrete patio they had dug up. Is that the vibe you got?
That's it.
Because it had some like barriers up, like so you couldn't really see the ground, right?
Right. It looked like dirt and concrete, like they had broken through. I didn't know if it was a patio. I actually thought it was something maybe to allow you to put like legs of a deck down instead of putting down, blocks or putting concrete on the ground. It was like a.
I tell you what, since I've started looking into missing persons cases, if somebody puts a patio down, I make a mental note of it.
Yeah, well, I mean,
they are seriously. Excellent places to hide bodies.
Yeah, so this was the patio was in Red Springs, which is nearby.
Do you know if it was on Snake Road?
No, it was on Lewis McNeil Road.
Okay.
Snake Road was part of the original theory, was that he was buried somewhere on Snake Road.
I think that somebody at some point they thought he had been killed there at least. Something. I think that maybe there was like a neighborhood, like a trailer park, maybe.
Yes. So where that comes from is Pamela Hammonds, and this is what blew my mind about this case. So this guy's married. This guy was married when he went missing. And in the Robisonian, which is the local paper down there, on September 6, 2017, so that's not quite a year, but almost a year after he went missing in November 2016, they ran, a little update article. And here's what some of that says. It says, "Man's disappearance a mystery. Pamela Hammonds wants to know what happened to her husband. Her father-in-law, however, has his own theory. Billie Jean Hammonds was murdered, a consequence of a drug-fed life. In an effort to cast a light on his disappearance, Pamela joined family and friends who gathered last Saturday outside Allenton Grocery on North Carolina 211 East in Lumberton to release balloons in remembrance of her husband, who had been missing for 9 months. Her husband grew up in this community. Hammond said she's frustrated that law enforcement doesn't acknowledge him as missing, although the Robeson County Sheriff's Office says there have been searches and the case is active. She has helped to spread the word through Facebook. My mission is to have him be known as a missing person," she said. She's been driving back and forth from her home in Florida to Lumberton every few weeks to distribute flyers about Billie Jean's disappearance. The last time anyone saw Billie Jean was about 10:30 p.m. on November the 26th, 2016, when he went to visit his mother on Pinwheel Circle in Lumberton. He said he'd be back in 30 minutes. Billie Carol Hammonds, who is Billie Jean's sister, didn't report him missing until December 9th, 2016, which was 13 days after he was last seen. "I've been looking for him since December the 13th, Pamela said. A search for Billie Jean was conducted on December 13th, 2016, which was on Snake Road in Lumberton. Multiple searches in different areas have been conducted for this missing person by the Sheriff's Department, says Sheriff's Major Anthony Thompson. Thompson would not comment further because the case is active. But at the Snake Road search, there was a bloody shoe that was found. It could not be linked to Billie Jean. The mystery continues because of Billie Jean's connection to the case of Rebecca Muse Hunt, who on November 22nd, 2016, was shot by Lumberton police officer Daniel Marie Smith in the parking lot of the Dollar General store, which we already talked about. According to witnesses, Muse tried to drive away as Smith was handcuffing Billie Jean, and Smith moved Hammonds out of the way as the truck, driven by Muse, started backing out of the parking lot. So Muse was ordered multiple times to stop, but did not, and Smith was struck by the door. So he fired 2 shots, and they both struck her. He ends up being cleared by the Robeson County District Attorney, Johnson Britt. Britt said in his report that attempts to interview Billie Jean were unsuccessful because he could not be found. And Pamela says Billie Jean had a drug problem. He was in trouble all his life. Did you want to jump in here? Because I got a little more article, but not much more.
Well, I was just going to say, I think that it's like an unfortunate coincidence that that happened. I don't think it's really related to anything.
Well, I mean, I have a theory on part of it. So Pamela said that there had been a rumor that Billie Jean was shot and killed. She says, it's a small town and stories grow. Billy Hammonds also had a theory that I know a drug dealer killed him because he stole drugs from him. This is all about drugs. Hammonds even provides some details. I think he was killed on Snake Road in a trailer, and they did not check the trailers before they tore them down. The trailers were torn down November 26, 2016. Leslie Brewer, who was a permit clerk for the Robeson County Department of Building Safety and Code Enforcement, said they had not issued any permits for demolition that they knew of on Snake Road. Part of Snake Road is in Lumberton city limits, but the city government revealed no records of authorized demolitions, and part of Snake Road is not in the city limits, so it would be a county matter. And then Pamela says that she just wants justice and closure. And again, it describes Billie Jean, 36 years old, 6 feet 2 inches tall, 175 pounds, brown hair, brown eyes, and multiple tattoos. And it requests anyone who knows anything to please call the Robeson County Sheriff's Department. So I think whatever he did, whatever happened with the police, I think he owed somebody money for that. And they were just sick of him.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So you think that they confiscated something? Do you have any idea if the arrest went through, or that like they just gave up because there's now been a shooting? Or that would be digging pretty far into that, I guess.
Well, I started digging into it, but this is all unfolded in like the last 2 days. The other interesting part of this, I think you just found it, didn't you? Okay. This woman that was with him in 2016, Rebecca Muse Hunt, she had been a missing person back in February of 2013.
Right, and her missing persons flyer is just right out there on the internet. Now we know she's been found because she's been shot by a police officer, and like 3 years later. So
yeah, she returned home on Thursday, March the 7th. And so the missing persons flyer got circulated basically the end of February. And then 2 weeks later, she returned home. These people are doing this to their families. And that's what was so interesting to me. Because the basic, and I'm,
Could you clarify what you mean by that?
So when these people are out and about, both of them, Billie Jean Hammonds and Rebecca Muse Hunt, were both married. They have families, they have mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters who are in their lives, who know enough about them to know they're involved in drugs. When they get themselves into these situations where Rebecca Muse Hunt goes missing, where Billie Jean Hammonds goes missing, it must be absolutely terrifying to be one of those family members where all you can think is, my loved one has finally done something to get themselves disappeared. And I say that because, they're both reported missing, even though his case wasn't. I don't think the sheriff thought his case was a missing persons case. I think his case to the sheriff was a homicide investigation. They just did not have the body yet. I even think that someone had told them. And
Well, it sounds like
clearly,
his dad was telling them.
well, I mean, I think someone involved had told them, look.
See, I feel like he was just as much a missing person as anybody else is in that area, and I don't see where there was any sort of difference. I don't see that he was treated any differently than any other 30-something-year-old adult going missing would have been treated. And here's the thing, they found him.
That was going to be my point, was he is definitely not a missing person anymore. He's a rare case. Here's my point, though. How did they know to dig there? That's
Somebody told them.
That's what I mean. Somebody involved in this crime
But you
gave
can't say
someone
that.
else involved in this crime up. You see what I
Right,
mean?
and I don't feel like that is a mistreated missing persons case. I feel like they found him, and so, I mean, yeah, you don't, call in any sort of special team to start hunting down a 30-something-year-old man, right?
No, yeah, but if you go looking, though, if you go researching Billie Jean Hammond, a lot of people were saying that the sheriff's department wasn't doing their job. His wife and several of the people that are involved in giving quotes to different articles say that they're sort of playing this card where he was an indigenous person who went missing in this area and no one was looking for him. But
Right,
what I'm saying is, I don't think they ever thought. I don't think the sheriff we're looking for a missing person. I think the sheriff early on had information that Billy was no longer with us. He just did not know where. Otherwise, they would not have been conducting those searches in 2017 and 2018 looking for a body.
Now, his body was just recovered, right?
That is correct. The previous searches were unsuccessful.
So we're talking about April of 2022?
Actually, May of 2020. No,
Wow.
end of April, first part of May 2022. Yeah.
Okay. And so I just want to sort of point this out. I have a big problem with any sort of just disparaging treatment of people for any reason, right? Whether it's your gender or your race or your occupation or whatever. Okay, so, and I want every single missing person on earth to be reunited with their identity, whether they're alive or dead. And I want all the unidentified bodies to get their names back. Now, having said all that, I hope everyone realizes, and this case is just somewhere for me to sort of insert my 2 cents. When you make choices in life, any choices, good, bad, or indifferent, you end up in places. And I feel like if you're expecting law enforcement or anybody else to come save you, after you've gone missing, if it has to do with some of the choices you made or didn't make, right? I think you're going to be disappointed.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very complicated for...
I'm just saying, they were saying that the sheriffs weren't doing anything. I don't know. What did they want the sheriffs to do?
In those articles that I read about this, it is pretty recent to the person going missing. So there's, shockingly, this little local paper and another paper nearby covered this case 4 times.
I think that's all
that's
the news there is.
Yeah, that's more than usual. But
that's a small area, right?
Yeah, it's a really small area. It's it's Eastern North Carolina. There's not much to it. All of this is taking place sort of south of Raleigh, North Carolina. If you look at it on a map, it's the Lumberton area. You sort
Right.
of have to, circle around Robeson County down there. And it gets kind of murky when you go like trying to look at it geographically. You can't always tell. Like, you can literally be at one side of something like Snake Road and you're in Lumberton, and then on the other side of Snake Road you're in Red Springs. So, there's a lot of these little small towns down there. And I think jurisdictionally it gets complicated. But I think the truth is it's very difficult to put resources towards, like, sort of just searching for this 36-year-old guy who, like Rebecca Muse Hunt, he has dipped in and out of places. And honestly, like, even in the article where the woman is asking help finding her husband, she admits she was living in Florida.
Well,
So,
that's what I'm saying. I just don't feel like it's the best thing. Well, and I want every missing person to be found, but I don't know. I just don't quite understand like what she was wanting.
well, I see what you're saying. I mean, I don't feel like it's fair to disparage anyone in a case like this, because these cases are weirdly complex. And I do see how somebody could look at that and go, he was just involved in this officer involved shooting and the police have done something to him. If you're like sort of conspiracy minded, or like that's just your experience in the area.
Well, and possibly, but I feel like regardless of whether or not he was a drug user or what have you, I feel like the response to, the what was he, 37? To a
36, yeah.
36-year-old man going missing is going to be about the same.
Yeah, I mean, I would tend to agree with you.
Because I mean, literally they are the most invulnerable humans. I mean, they're not little kids, right? They're more than likely not going to be victimized in a way like attacked or whatever. I mean, obviously, this guy was murdered, but it's a whole different situation, right?
Yeah, so to clarify this without us getting into a situation where it sounds like it's victim blaming or anything like that.
I'm not blaming
This
him at all.
it I think that what we're getting at is there are sort of scales of vulnerability, and then there's scales of risk. And law enforcement has to look at those. The most vulnerable people are obviously the smallest children. And then you have all sorts of people that fall into the vulnerabilities right above that, where people with intellectual disabilities and younger people, and then it sort of just keeps going down the scale. And I have to agree with you that somewhere on the far side of the scale of the less vulnerable people are, men in their 30s and 40s. If they don't have
Right,
any of
because he
those
was
capabilities.
he was huge and he looked
Right.
like he was in like, I mean, at least fair shape, right? So, obviously I imagine he was shot with a gun, right?
I don't know.
That's
They
how.
haven't said that yet, but I'm picturing
Well, but
something like that.
you don't I mean, I don't imagine somebody like strangled him, right? Because he would be able to not be strangled,
I
right?
would say that's less likely, yeah.
Okay. I'm just saying, like, physically speaking, a big guy like that's going to be taken out with a gun because of just the way life works, the way death works, I guess, actually. And so, you know, while it stinks that he is dead, I don't see a problem with what happened here. With law enforcement. And I don't say that very often. I feel like they were doing what they could and they ended up finding him. Now, is it, what, 6 years later? Yes, it's 6 years later, right? But they found him.
Yeah, this family got closure out of it. Where I was headed with that risk versus vulnerability thing is this. I think when you're close to someone who has something psychological going on that you know about, but like isn't known, or someone who is you're close to, I think you can perceive them as vulnerable if they're using drugs. Whereas law enforcement doesn't necessarily see that as a vulnerability in most situations. There are situations where that becomes a
Well, let me
vulnerability.
ask.
I think they see it as a risk.
Let me ask you this: would his wife have called the police and said, "I think you guys need to do something because my husband has done something that might get him killed by a drug dealer"?
You mean like right after the Dollar General incident?
Well, basically, whatever the premise was that they weren't at, like why they were not acting because he did drugs or sold drugs or whatever, right? That's
Right.
you get this vibe that they're saying like you're not doing enough because you're demeaning him or whatever, right? It's not
Right.
important enough to you. So, you know, would you call it? I mean, I don't think that any spouse would do that, right? And so when it goes, you know, ass backwards, when everything blows up in your face, I mean, you didn't call them like beforehand, right? The police, I mean, you didn't call the police and say, my husband is in, deep trouble. I need you to help him, right?
Right.
Well, then he disappears and you want them to help, right? I'm just saying, like, I don't see the balance there. It may not make sense to anybody but me, but I'm just saying, like, if you're not willing to, you know, at least try and neutralize the situation before it happens, you can't expect law enforcement to pick up, the steaming pile of poo.
Well, so I had one of the reasons this question comes up for me is I had questions about the different delays. He goes missing on the night of the 26th. He's reported missing on the 9th. His wife began searching for him on the 13th. And most of that for me screamed that,
This was not unusual.
well, so yeah, that was part of it. I was like, they know something. But what I read from that, having read entirely too many really boring facts and factual summaries related to criminal cases, was I read that like he had gone to ground and that they knew it because of the incident with the police and whatever he and
That he
Rebecca
had done what?
Muse, that I think that they thought he was laying low.
Oh, I see.
Like he had, and I figure what he told his mom, because it seems like the family knows that there's addiction issues, and that's what I'm going to call him for this. He has addiction issues because when he said he was going, he says, I'm going to be gone for 30 minutes. I don't know what they might have been thinking, but my interpretation is they think he's going to fix it. Like they think he is headed out to deal with whatever has happened as sort of the fallout. Because the thing is, when people owe you money, it's one thing. So he may or may not have owed somebody some money. If you've stolen drugs from them, it's another thing. So that's how like his dad sort of presented it. But let me pose another theory for you. Maybe he did owe somebody money. Maybe he did steal the drugs. Or maybe they just thought because this officer involved shooting was front page news 4 days earlier that he was going to snitch.
Oh, yeah, because
I can tell you one thing Billie Jean Hammond did not want to do. That was go back to prison. So I went through his criminal record, and normally I wouldn't do this, but there's a pattern to all of this. In July of 1999, based on incidents in February and March of 1999, he pleads out to assault with a deadly weapon and communicating threats. And then, so that's 1999. He gets probation and a little bit of county jail time. We switch over to 2001. He gets caught again for assault and wanton injury and an attempted larceny. And this stems from an incident in August of 2001. In January of 2004, he gets a resisting arrest charge and an unauthorized use of motor vehicle. That's from a January and a February incident. It settles out in March as a part of a plea agreement. Those were felonies when they started. In June of 2004, he gets a felony larceny of a motor vehicle, and that's when his real problems start. He has a bunch of concurrent sentences in there, which means he had a bunch of charges, and they all sort of get consolidated down for judgments, but then some of them are running consecutively, and a consecutive sentence runs afterwards. But a concurrent sentence happens at the same time as another sentence. So then he starts getting real jail time, big boy jail time. In August of 2006, he picks up felony common law robbery and another assault with a deadly weapon. And then he picks up the same charge from another incident of August of 2006, and he starts getting years in prison. October of 2007, he gets out, he completes probation, and then he becomes a person who's been picked up on possession of Schedule II drugs, and he starts getting possession of firearms by felon charges. So those sentences get more serious, and they keep him straight for a couple of years, and then he starts getting felony B&Es in May of 2010. So May of 2010, he gets 3 counts of felony breaking and entering for various incidents. They run them all concurrently, but he ends up getting multiple years, and he gets out on probation, and his probation gets revoked. So then he gets another larceny after breaking and entering in 2010. And this is it comes much later conviction wise. So that means it was another incident that was tied to everything he was doing. And then in 2011, he gets multiple felonies laid on him, but suddenly he doesn't do jail time anymore. And he pleads out to a bunch of misdemeanors. So in my experience, what that is, and he does end up coming in and out of jail on those misdemeanors, because when you're on probation and you violate your probation, you have some trouble. Most of his appear to be hot drug tests, meaning he popped positive for a controlled substance. Well, as of March 2012, he never gets arrested again. So for 4 years, he does not get arrested. And this is all in the same town and county.
Right. And you got to think also, I think it started in 99. I think that was when he started. And so he was about 19 or so.
Yeah.
Okay. And so now you went from, 19 on up through his 20s. And so by 2013, he's, 33 or whatever. So, that you're a different person.
Well,
not you, but people change drastically from being a 19-year-old to being 35. I mean, it's a big change.
Yeah. Well, I believe that he began snitching.
Oh, like he was an informant?
Yeah. So I think clearly his family knows about the drug use. So maybe he stopped stealing. Or maybe he held a job to feed his issues.
So, we say that. Now, we say he wasn't arrested, but we kind of open this story up with the fact that he's being put in handcuffs, right? Because he was in the parking lot with a friend who had been missing, 3 years earlier, who wasn't really missing. But, and so what happened was that they had driven to a grocery store. And while they were in the grocery store, the two of them decided that they were going to steal some alcoholic beverages. And so they stole the alcoholic beverages and they left the grocery store and they drove over to the Dollar General store. And the grocery store employees had notified the police. And of course, they immediately spot them. And that's where it all starts. Billie Jean was in the driver's seat and he was in the process of trying to get him arrested. So she was about to be arrested too, right before she decided to drive away and he shot her. But she was actually severely injured in that incident.
Yeah.
And she had to be hospitalized for 6 months. And her medical bills exceeded $2.3 million.
I don't even know what to say to that. That's a difficult situation because that's a real medical thing going on.
They
But
all
it
had
is
immunity from all that, so I
who?
don't know. Like
You mean
they
like
weren't held accountable.
who wasn't held accountable?
The police.
They didn't do anything. They shot her because she tried to run him over.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Okay, I understand. I'm just saying.
They would be immune from like being responsible. I mean, she might as well have had a gun and been shooting him because she could absolutely kill him by backing over him.
Well, I just find it fascinating. Like, okay, so if we ignore everything else that's gone on here and the lost property and the money that's spent on the drugs and everything, and we like look at this situation and just take that $2.3 million in medical bills, which I know they're medical bills, which are always dubious in nature. That's the penalty that like can be paid for the higher risk lifestyles. And I don't think they were vulnerable people because they were using drugs and stealing the drinks and got caught in the Dollar General parking lot. I think that they were risking more. They had a higher risk going on. They may as well have been involved in, you know, uh, some kind of trafficking or some kind, like whether it's drug trafficking or human trafficking or something like that. They're operating on a pretty high level of risk that they maybe didn't consider it that way. But what?
Right. And I was just saying that should be considered.
Oh yeah, it absolutely like should
I
be
mean, the
considered.
difference in this situation, I don't know if I said it to begin with, but I believe they both, that it's been said they were smoking crack and
Yeah,
drinking alcohol. And
yeah.
so
I
in the
wasn't trying to imply
process,
that you didn't know. I'm saying the family didn't understand it that way.
but I'm saying in a general type way that if you're smoking crack and drinking alcohol, that's a choice that you've made.
Right.
It might impair your judgment when a police officer starts arresting your buddy and you realize you're going down too. Okay, but that's not like that is your responsibility, not anybody else's.
I think the approach is like I wouldn't know the risk that a family member was taking if I didn't understand cases like this. Like it wouldn't cross my mind. Like I would just sort of I don't know how to explain it, but I look at people and I think that some people sort of make up their mind that this is their life and this is the way they're going now. But I also think that some people do struggle with addiction as a disease. And whatever way they end up there, ever what leads them to those risky choices, I'm not judging them for it, but I will say this. At the end of the day, the Robeson County Sheriff's Department recovered his body 6 years later, 5.5 years later. So I don't think law enforcement was not trying to close this case.
Right. I don't think there was any mistreatment from like a victimology point of view here. I feel like they did what they would have done for any 36-year-old man that went missing.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to pivot away from this one because we had a lot going on earlier this year where we were trying to cover another case. So we were trying to cover a case that was down in Alabama. And we did record episodes, but those never released, right?
I have not heard them. No.
Okay. Now that we're going to talk about it. The reason I did not release these episodes is because there was a podcaster who did a pretty phenomenal job covering part of the case that we were working on. And I was trying to get in touch with them because I wanted to, they had some interview clips. And so every once in a while I run across a podcast that just seems like it's abandoned. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it just goes poof.
Yeah. Like 2 years ago, this one just stopped updating. But I saw where a production company had been messing with that case to do something on one of the true crime shows. True crime
Documentary.
Yeah, like a documentary or a series or something. So my thinking had been, I'm not going to cover this case right now with what we've done with it. We'll come back to it. And I sort of put the recordings to the side and I may redo them. I had this period of time where that case was going on. I was talking to a victim's family in another case that we're going to cover a little later. I sort of got sidetracked because we had this Sunday morning, where I got a new puppy, and my wife got bit by the new puppy, and it like created a lot of blood, and like there was a lot of trauma in my house. I didn't realize this was going to happen. It wasn't like nobody got hurt from it all. It just was. It created one of those moments in your life where you're looking at the people around you and you go, I don't know what just happened. And there was so much chaos that I missed something. And it was right in the middle of us covering this case that I was saying I'll probably put in the feed later. This is what I missed. And now this is March of this year, basically, that I'm talking about. We were doing this because we record things out of order, and like you and I put together lots of episodes at one time. Sometimes we record 3 or 4 episodes in a row, and then I'll put them on the shelf. And sometimes we record them and I literally put them in the feed minutes later. What's interesting is I was looking for a body in that case. That is the case of Carrie Lawson. And I don't want to discuss her case yet because of the way we may cover that. But when I do that, I get into this mode where I sort of hit NamUs, I hit the Charlie Project, I start hitting the local newspapers and criminal records in the area for unresolved matters. And I start just making a pile to say, I wonder if we could find her body, like if she's an unidentified body in another town or something like that.
That's really interesting because I remember this happening different, but go ahead.
You remember this happening different because you're not me. So,
but I don't know which one's right.
Oh, okay. Well, probably neither.
It doesn't really matter. It's just funny to me how like we experience something, we both experience what ultimately is the same thing, but we both remember it completely different.
What ends up happening here is you also created a list. And I think that you were sort of looking alongside me. I think you were looking for Carrie Lawson.
Well, Nero, I can tell you what I was doing. I was actually, I looked at the list on about April the 2nd of 2022. That's just around then. And it was literally the very first body that was the most recent that had been entered.
I think the context is missing here. But so the first body, what list did you look at?
Like I literally just said, share me the unidentified bodies, right? And this body was entered into NamUs on April the 1st. Okay. And because I was looking at it on April the 2nd, like that body was, if not the first, one of the very first. I just looked at it chronologically. I do that sometimes.
So people don't know what we're talking about yet.
But what do you mean? Do you understand what I'm saying?
I understand what you're saying, but they don't know what we're referencing here.
Because this is one of those situations where I said, how many people can this possibly be? And I pick somebody.
Yeah. Meg ends up, so she's looking for Carrie Lawson and decides that like there's another rabbit hole that's more interesting. She makes a match in NamUs.
Well, I don't know that I was actually looking for Carrie Lawson. I was just looking for somebody interesting to try and identify.
In the course of her doing that, in that crazy morning I was talking about, where I end up like...
Oh, that was April 3rd.
What was?
When she got bit. Right.
So what I'm saying is you sent this to me that weekend and this got lost.
Oh, well, so to me... I sent it to you and you gave me a really good reason why I was wrong.
Right. And that's sort of where we're headed with this. So I looked at it, but I didn't look a lot further, mainly because of the chaos there. What I found, okay, this person was a NamUs case. Do you have the numbers sitting in front of you?
It's still a NamUs case.
I know, but
I'll tell you. Hold on.
If you type in 13255, you gave me a different one, and I need that one for a second.
Oh, okay. Hold on 1 second.
I might be able to search it up here. I don't have I have a different phone at the moment.
Just give me a second. 13255.
Yeah.
That's the number.
What's the number that was next to it?
For what? Oh,
You sent me two numbers.
the UP.
Yeah.
The U. Yeah, UP. Oh, hold on. I'm sorry. Okay, it's 90197. It's UP 90197.
Okay. So Meg goes into NamUs and she pulls out a March 28th, 2022 case from Bessemer, Alabama. And she tells me that she knows who it is. So I go looking for the person she thinks it is, and I find I think it was reasonable.
Yeah, she looks like her.
Yeah, I found a person who looks just like her online with a slightly different name. And I basically said, I think this person is alive.
And then that was it for me.
Yeah. So Meg stops looking at it. But the reason I'm telling people about it today, first of all, it's an Alabama case that we're talking about. When we had been talking about Carrie Lawson, this case came up, but it's a completely different thing. It wasn't related to Carrie Lawson. I was just looking to see if they had recently found Carrie Lawson's body. And instead, Meg says this body from March 28th, 2022, which is in NamUs. If you look in there, it's UP 90197.
Look quickly, though.
Yeah, look quickly because it won't be there for a moment. This is a match. It will disappear in the next couple of days. She sends me a text message, and it literally just says UP and that number, and then it says is MP 13255. Well, that other case was entered into NamUs a very long time ago. It was actually created in December 15th, 2011, from a case that was 10 years earlier. And that case was out of California. So this is a body found in Bessemer, Alabama, that has a date of last contact from September 1st, 2001, and an investigative contact in Napa, California. So when that happens, I don't like to look at those cases. What happened here was there were 10 facial case IDs, which means it is a full facial picture from the time of this person. And I'll get to why I'm babbling about all of this in a minute. I found lots of interesting information from these cases. But this was a 40-year-old woman whose name was Janet Jones Luxford, who also had gone by Janet Williams, who was 5 feet 2 inches tall and weighed 110 pounds. She disappeared during unknown circumstances, September 1st, 2001. And on September 22nd, 2002, her daughter called the Napa Police Department, which is her local police department, to report her missing. She stated that in September 2001, that the missing person here, who is Janet Luxford, had left her residence in Jacksonville, Florida, at 3638 Ernest Street, and she was later seen at a motel in Bessemer, Alabama, but she had not been seen or heard from since then. Stated that she had blonde hair and blue eyes. So they started investigating the case, and the only note they leave in here for us is she was last seen leaving with an unknown trucker. So Meg decided, just based on this incoming report about the unidentified person, whose skeletal remains were located in the woods by, it says, a citizen. But what I think happened here is like the killer led them to the body on March the 28th, 2022, and they entered it as an unknown body the day before Meg found it on April 1st, 2022. They could not estimate her weight. They believe she was a white female between the ages of 18 and 99, which is just the general range they throw in for I don't know. But they did think she was an adult. And her estimated PMI was 20 years ago. She was estimated to be between 5 feet tall and 5 feet 3 inches tall. Well, what is really interesting about all of this, and the only reason I'm really telling you about it, is a fascinating little blurb appeared in a South Carolina newspaper. Where I picked it up was a retelling of the newspaper where they say it on TV, and that was on WVTM 13. And here's all it says. It says, South Carolina man confesses to killing woman in 2001. Bessemer, Alabama. Police in Bessemer, Alabama said a South Carolina man recently confessed to killing a woman more than 20 years ago. On March 27th, Bessemer police said Brian Jones reported a murder he allegedly committed in 2001. Police said Jones led them to an area of Harmer Street and Valley Creek where they discovered skeletal remains. The Jefferson County Coroner's Office was contacted and recovered the remains. Jones gave the deceased name as then 41-year-old Janet Luxford, aka Janet Jones, as his then current girlfriend. Detectives confirmed that Janet Luxford was listed as missing and endangered from Napa, California in 2002. Detectives would later discover that Luxford was listed missing by a daughter in September 2002 after not seeing her mother in a long while. Police said Jones reported killing the woman following a fight in a hotel on 9th Avenue Southwest in Bessemer. Allegedly, Jones claims that her death was accidental. Although the remains found have not been officially identified, Jones is being charged with the death of Janet Luxford. The Jefferson County Coroner's Office is actively searching for medical records and using DNA to help identify the remains, but this process could take as long as 9 months. Jones is charged with murder and abuse of a corpse. He is being held in the Jefferson County Jail on a $765,000 bond. So you called that right out the gate with it just being popped into NamUs because we were looking for Carrie Lawson. And I didn't give you any credit for that when it happened. I really thought that she was probably still alive and estranged from her family.
Right. So you found a picture of a woman that, to me, matched the pictures enough to say she's not missing.
Yeah, it was nose, teeth, eyes all matched, and it looked like an older version of that woman.
It does, and that's amazing to me because clearly, now, I mean, this
It's
could
like a
still
woman
go
online playing
sideways.
with her dog. So okay. So in theory, this could still not be a match because they could come back and say, no, this is not her because she does have
Now,
children.
well, and right. So there's DNA, but so she wasn't killed by a stranger. This guy that confessed, he was her boyfriend, right? And the reason that he waited so long to come forward, did you see that?
Why?
He didn't want to quote let his parents down, end quote. And either both of them or the last surviving one died last year.
Yeah.
So yeah, I totally called this, and I actually do that quite a bit, and this has actually made me rethink like why I don't push it harder. Because, man, I find just about everybody. I'm telling you, it's
Well,
not hard.
He stuck her in a suitcase, and then he put the suitcase in the woods. He took a bus from South Carolina back to the Birmingham. He had taken a bus 20 years later from South Carolina to the Birmingham area, and he decided he had to confess, and he sat outside of the police station until he finally got up the nerve to call and tell them that she would be in the suitcase, and he took them to where she was. It's so interesting that he was waiting for her parents to die.
His parents.
He's waiting for his parents to die. That's so interesting to me. So she had met him as a truck driver, and what happened here was that they get into a fight. He says that Luxford wanted money to go back to California to see her parents, but during the fight, he ends up hitting her with a golf club and killing her.
Right, and so it was just he snapped. I mean, that's what happened. I don't know what they were fighting about, but
I mean, just saying that's what he comes up with. And the way that this went down, I don't think there's going to be a lot of bullshit here. But this is one of the most fascinating one-off murders because this guy, it just ate at him for 20 years. This woman had 3 small children at the time, under the age of 15, I think. I don't know how small we would consider small, but one of them was 10 or 11 years old.
Okay, and this guy got away with it, and her body has never been recovered until he led them to it.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
So, it definitely took a turn. I mean, now
Well,
I don't think it's going to be a situation where he's killed anybody else. I feel like he probably really regretted it.
that was my next question to you. I was going to ask, like, do you think there's any way he killed anyone else? Because my gut says no freaking way.
Um, it is highly unlikely, in my opinion, and based on I've never seen a case like this actually, but based on because normally they get caught, right? They don't turn
Yeah,
themselves in.
this is basically like a domestic violence homicide on the road. So
Well, right, and so I've never seen anything like this, but for the most part, him going in and confessing and bringing himself like because he's going to go to jail for the rest of his life now, and because he killed this woman and concealed it for so long. But he's not he's the type of person that's not a killer. He just snapped and he became one, like, momentarily.
yeah, well, this case is going to play out in court in some way. I do hope that that is her and they identify her body, but I am going to come back
It,
and do an update if it is not her. I'm telling you that right now.
well, I don't see how he could have identified. I mean, could
I hope
have.
they identify her body.
No, but I can't see how. Like, he found somebody, right? He led them to somebody's body.
Well, I'm saying it's definitely. I mean,
He
to
thinks it
me, it
was
looks
her.
like it's all wrapped up. Yeah, he definitely thinks it was a woman named Janet Jones because that's who he told him it was.
Well,
So
and I was I was so sure you had found her alive, and I was like, "Wow, I can't believe I missed that," and I just dropped it because that's actually a little bit embarrassing for me.
oh,
But no,
what,
I was
for
right.
somebody to be found alive.
No,
We
no,
have.
it's embarrassing for me to make a match and then you show me the person alive because
Oh,
I
I'm
should
not
have
doing
caught
it.
that.
Oh, but I'm not doing
I
that
don't
to.
feel like you're doing it to embarrass me. I'm just saying, like, the circumstances are embarrassing. No, I know. I mean, you should tell me that you found somebody. I
I
would
just.
tell you.
I mean, I do a cursory like image search for them
Well,
to
so
see
do
if.
I. And that's why it was weird that I didn't find that. I mean, I
What.
look immediately, and so many people that are missing or even passed on, they still look alive in some of the random, like, just name and address type
Yeah.
databases. They still look like the person.
Well, I have an Israel Keys like list person. I won't call them a victim because I don't think they're dead, but I've almost convinced myself that they're alive as many times as I've convinced myself that they're dead. And this would have been the Tupper Lake robbery victim. I have gone back to this person so many times that I make myself crazy. Sometimes, like I'm just looking for like I have them, I have all their aliases, I have all their particulars. I even know this person's social security number at this point. I just want to sign that after a particular day at a particular time, like that they were doing some either one thing or another thing, it could be either way, that like they are walking around living and breathing. The truth is, I think they had a whole name change and a bunch of stuff going on, and they just happened to coincide with this time frame. I've talked about them on the podcast before, but I'm not going to mention them again here because I want to say that one of the most interesting elements of this is that they were one gender and are completely living as another gender without like it's like the turn of a switch. It's basically like on a day in April of what year was that? 2009? I don't
Yeah,
remember off the
it's
top.
2009,
Is it
April of 2009.
yeah, there was this one missing persons case that like doesn't really make a lot of sense because it's on the West Coast, although the person's on the East Coast. The missing persons report is on the East Coast. They were from the East Coast, but they should have been on the West Coast. Turn the key, and that person no longer exists anywhere. And
I think that is accredited. I think that's a reason why the person isn't a victim of Israel Keys because of all those other things.
well, again, the, it is an absolutely fascinating case that, like, if they're alive, I have no business going down that path with all the information I have at this point. If they're not alive, I feel like I have a duty to figure out where they are. It's so
Well,
weird.
I did the math on the, like, considering all that stuff with that, and I couldn't make the rental car miles work for what would have had to have happened there.
Yeah. So that's where we find ourselves. We will be talking to a victim's family next week, and we'll have lots of trigger warnings on that episode. But actually, it might be episodes. There might be 2 of them. But we do hope you'll join us for a pretty interesting look at a very cold case. Thank you for joining us. We are sponsored by LabRottiCreations.com. You can check them out at LabRottiCreations.com, and you can still use the code CRIMEXS for a fun pop pet portrait of your own pet. You can also reach us on Twitter, Instagram at TrueCrimeXS, or you can give us a call if you know anything about any of the cases that we're talking about at 252-365-5593. You can also reach us at Gmail at truecrimexs@gmail.com, and you can check out our website at www.truecrimexs.com. We'll see you next time.